Every trader thinks they're making progress. That this time will be different. That they've learned their lesson. That they've finally broken the cycle. But the market knows better. Because it's not your strategy that keeps failing. It's your emotion, repeating the same story in new disguises. The market runs in cycles. But so do you. And until you see that truth clearly, you'll keep living the same pattern. Just with different charts, different assets, and the same old mind. Every bull market begins with hope. Every crash begins with greed. Every rebound begins with denial. And every recovery begins with fear. It's the same cycle, not just on the chart, but in the human heart. You see, the market doesn't create emotion. It amplifies it. It reflects the collective psychology of everyone involved. When you look at a chart, you're not seeing numbers. You're seeing emotion in data form. Every peak is euphoria. Every dip is despair. Every sideways movement is confusion. The market breathes emotion, and every trader breathes with it. At first, it seems external. You think you're reacting to the chart. But slowly, you realize. It's the chart reacting to you. Every time you think, this is the bottom. You're acting on hope, not logic. Every time you hold a losing position. Because, it has to reverse soon. You're trapped in denial. And every time you exit too early. Only to watch the price explode afterward. You're feeling the pain of regret. The purest emotion of all. This is the emotional loop that traps even the most experienced traders. Because emotion doesn't care about skill. It only cares about attention. And once it has your attention, it runs the show. You may think you've changed. New strategy, new system, new rules. But deep down, you're still running the same emotional software. And until that software is rewritten, the market will keep pressing the same buttons. That's why traders repeat mistakes they swore they'd never make again. It's not because they're foolish. It's because emotion has memory. And the body remembers what the mind forgets. When fear hits, logic fades. When greed ignites, awareness disappears. You can't think your way out of emotion. Because emotion moves faster than thought. It's not the market that's volatile. It's you. This is why the emotional cycle never ends. It loops, not because the market is cruel, but because the mind is predictable. The cycle always begins with hope. You see a setup, a pattern, a glimpse of opportunity. The market moves in your favor. And dopamine floods your brain. You start believing again. You feel aligned, intelligent, in control. But then the market shifts. You hesitate, telling yourself it's just a correction. Denial. The loss deepens. You hold, because admitting defeat hurts more than losing money. Then comes fear. You panic, close at the bottom, watching helplessly as the chart reverses. The moment you exit, now you feel regret. And from that regret grows hope again. You re-enter too soon, trying to recover what was lost. And the cycle begins anew. It's not the market's cycle. It's yours. You see it everywhere. In forums, in chat rooms, in trading communities. The same pattern repeats across thousands of people who've never met each other, yet act in unison as if pulled by the same invisible thread. Because emotion is contagious. When the crowd is euphoric, you feel it. When panic spreads, you feel it. You tell yourself you're making rational decisions. But you're just swimming in collective emotion. That's why markets crash together. That's why bubbles grow together. Not because of logic, but because of synchronized emotion. The illusion of independence is one of the greatest traps in trading. You think you're acting alone. But every decision you make is subtly shaped by the collective mood of the crowd. Your chart is just a mirror of that collective state. An emotional echo chamber, where fear and greed take turns holding the microphone. And the market, patient and neutral, simply records it all. Breaking the emotional cycle doesn't mean you stop feeling emotion. It means you stop being ruled by it. You learn to recognize the early signs. The quickened heartbeat. The restless urge to act. The voice that says, just one more trade. When you see it early, you can observe it. When you observe it, you can interrupt it. And that's how awareness breaks the loop. Because you can't change what you don't notice. And you can't master what you refuse to face. The market is not just an external system. It's an emotional amplifier. Every time you trade, it projects your internal state onto the screen. The question isn't, why do markets repeat patterns? The question is, why do we? Until that answer changes, nothing in your results ever will. The real cycle isn't on the chart. It's in the mirror. And until you confront it, the market will keep teaching you the same lesson, in slightly different forms, until you finally learn to listen. The loop ends when awareness begins. Because the market doesn't punish repetition. It simply mirrors it. And once you stop being the loop, you start seeing the truth beneath it. That emotion was never the problem. Unawareness was. And when awareness returns, the cycle breaks. Not because the market changed, but because you did. Fear and greed. 2 words. 1 cycle. Every decision you make in the market is born from one of these 2 forces. You can call it strategy. You can call it analysis. But beneath it all, it's still emotion wearing logic as a mask. Fear whispers in silence. It doesn't shout. It creeps in when the candle starts turning red. When the market moves against you. When uncertainty stretches longer than your patience. Fear doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like hesitation. The tiny pause before an entry. The refusal to pull the trigger on a perfect setup. The way you second-guess your plan. Because of what happened last time. Fear disguises itself as caution. But it's really self-protection. It doesn't care about profit. It cares about safety. That's why most traders never grow. They trade to avoid pain. Not to seek truth. On the other side, greed is not about wanting more money. It's about wanting more control. It's the belief that if you act now, you can force the market to give you what you want. Greed isn't loud either. It's seductive. It sounds like confidence. It tells you, you see what others can't. You've earned this risk. This time, you're right. And that's how it traps you. Not through ignorance, but through ego. Because greed doesn't need you to be reckless. It just needs you to believe you're smarter than the market. Fear and greed feed each other like mirrors in motion. Fear creates hesitation. Hesitation creates regret. Regret creates greed. And greed brings you right back to fear. The cycle continues. Not because you lack skill, but because you keep mistaking emotion for intuition. You think, I just feel this trade. But what you're really feeling is the residue of past emotion. The echo of unprocessed fear or unsatisfied greed. The mind doesn't forget. It repeats until it resolves. Every trader is a pendulum swinging between extremes. When you're afraid, you undertrade. When you're greedy, you overtrade. When you're balanced, you stop swinging. But only for a moment. Because balance isn't permanent. It's a temporary state that must be rebuilt every single day. And that's what makes trading so human. It's not a test of intelligence, but of inner stability. You can master analysis, backtest every system, memorize every candle pattern. But if you can't manage the energy of fear and greed, you'll still lose. Because the chart doesn't care what you know. It reacts to what you feel. The anatomy of fear and greed isn't external. It's biological. Fear narrows perception. It makes you see only danger. Your mind stops looking for opportunity and starts scanning for threat. Greed does the opposite. It widens perception too far. You stop seeing risk. You see only reward. The body releases dopamine. The heart rate rises. And before you know it, you're clicking out of impulse, not awareness. That's why trading is less about intellect and more about biology. It's not about fighting emotion. It's about understanding its rhythm. When you feel fear, it's not a signal to avoid. It's a signal to slow down. When you feel greed, it's not a sign to push harder. It's a sign to breathe. Because awareness doesn't suppress emotion. It observes it without becoming it. Most traders try to eliminate emotion. That's a mistake. Emotion is data. The oldest, most accurate signal the body gives you. But when you suppress it, it doesn't disappear. It mutates. It returns stronger, disguised as intuition, and sabotages your logic when you least expect it. The only way to master emotion is to stop running from it. Watch how fear enters your thoughts. Watch how greed disguises itself as confidence. The more you observe it, the less control it has over you. Because emotion loses its power when it's seen clearly. There's a point every trader reaches when they realize the market isn't about prediction. It's about perception. And your perception is filtered through the emotional lens you wear. Two traders can look at the same chart. One sees opportunity. The other sees danger. The chart didn't change. The emotion did. That's why the true battle in trading isn't against volatility. It's against interpretation. It's against how emotion distorts what's real. When fear dominates, you sell too soon. When greed dominates, you hold too long. And in both cases, you lose not because the market moved, but because your perception did. So, what does mastery look like? It's not fearlessness. It's not greedlessness. It's awareness between the two. The space where emotion arises, but doesn't dictate. Where you feel everything, but react to nothing. That space, that moment of clarity before the click, is where all great trades are made. Not from certainty, but from balance. Because fear and greed are not enemies. They're indicators, showing you exactly where you still lack awareness. When you stop blaming them, you start learning from them. And that's when the emotional cycle begins to break. Fear and greed are not opposites, they are twins. One protects, the other pursues. But both serve the same master. Your ego. When the ego falls silent, they lose their grip. And what's left is awareness. Pure, calm, and timeless. That's where trading begins to transform. From a battle into a practice. Every trader eventually reaches a breaking point. Not the kind that ends a career, but the kind that ends an illusion. It happens quietly. After enough wins that didn't bring peace, and enough losses that didn't destroy you, you begin to realize something deeper. The market was never the problem. You were. The loop begins with excitement. You discover a new setup, a new indicator, a new system. You backtest, you optimize. You convince yourself, this time will be different. But deep down, it's the same pattern repeating under a new disguise. Different chart, same emotion. Different trade, same reaction. And the more you chase certainty, the more uncertain you become. You start to notice the rhythm. It always begins with hope. Then comes control. Then fear. Then regret. And back to hope again. A perfect emotional circle. No matter how advanced your strategy becomes, the loop persists. Until one day you finally ask the right question. What if the problem isn't my method, but my mind? That question is the first crack in the cycle. Awareness enters through that crack. Not as a solution, but as silence. At first, it's uncomfortable. You sit in front of the chart. And instead of analyzing, you start noticing how your breathing changes when a candle spikes. How your heartbeat speeds up when you hover over the buy button. How your thoughts start predicting outcomes before price even moves. This is awareness. The watcher behind the trader. It doesn't interfere. It observes. It listens. And in that listening, something shifts. You stop being in the emotion and start watching the emotion. And that tiny shift is the beginning of mastery. Trading without awareness is like sailing through fog with a cracked compass. You can still move, but you'll never know where you're going. Awareness doesn't remove the fog. It just helps you realize the compass was inside you all along. Every impulse, every hesitation, every spark of greed or fear. It's a message. The body speaks first. The chart only echoes it. The market doesn't test your strategy. It tests your presence. When you're lost in emotion, you trade from the past. From memory, from bias, from scars. But when you're present, you trade from reality. From what's actually happening right now. That's why awareness is the only real edge left. Because everything else, systems, signals, algorithms, can be copied. But no one can replicate your awareness. It's the one thing that cannot be automated. Awareness changes the very texture of experience. The loss that used to sting becomes a lesson you actually feel. The win that used to inflate your ego becomes just another wave passing through. You no longer seek stability in outcomes. You find it in observation. It's subtle. You don't force yourself to be calm. You simply stop adding noise. You stop believing every thought. You stop chasing every emotion. And in that stopping, clarity arises. The loop begins to break. Not because you fought it, but because you saw it for what it was. A pattern of thought mistaken for truth. Fear no longer controls your exits. Greed no longer controls your entries. You see both arise. You breathe. And you wait. The market moves. But you don't move with it. You respond, not react. That's awareness in motion. Calm doesn't mean emotionless. It means being aware enough To choose how you respond. You begin to trade less. But see more. You begin to feel more. But suffer less. Because awareness turns pain into understanding. It turns chaos into rhythm. When you lose, you no longer ask, why me? You ask, what did I feel before this? That question, simple but radical, turns the market into a mirror. Every trade becomes a reflection. Every reaction becomes feedback. And every loss becomes a teacher. The irony is, the more aware you become, the less you need to trade. Because you start to see how much of your activity was just emotional motion. A way to escape stillness. But awareness thrives in stillness. It expands in silence. So you sit longer between trades. You breathe more. You analyze less. You observe the self that wants to act. And sometimes, that's the trade. The act of not acting. The market rewards those who can remain still when everyone else moves. Stillness is not inaction. It's control. The kind that doesn't come from dominance, but from surrender. Surrendering the need to know. The need to win. The need to be right. And in that surrender, you become free. Because awareness is not a skill. It's your natural state. Beneath all the noise. You don't have to create it. You just have to stop covering it. When you trade with awareness, you no longer chase the market. You mirror it. You move with it. You breathe with it. And suddenly, trading stops being a hunt for profit and becomes a practice of presence. You're not trying to master the market anymore. You're mastering yourself. And that was always the real game. At some point in the trader's journey, you stop asking how to win and start asking why you trade at all. That question changes everything. It pierces through the surface of profit and loss and forces you to confront something deeper. What are you truly searching for? Because beneath every chart, beneath every strategy, there's a hidden desire to prove something, to find meaning, to feel and control in a world that rarely is. In the beginning, trading feels external. A contest between you and the market. You study, you plan, you fight. As if the chart were an opponent. But over time, the illusion fades. You realize the market doesn't even know you exist. It's not watching you. Not punishing you. Not rewarding you. It simply is. Moving, shifting, breathing. Indifferent to your effort. And in that realization, something inside you softens. You stop trying to conquer the market. You start learning from it. The emotional cycle breaks not by resistance, but by understanding. You begin to see fear not as weakness, but as awareness of risk. You see greed not as sin, but as energy. Misguided, but powerful. And you learn to redirect it. Not suppress it. You stop fighting emotions. You start working with them. Each emotion becomes a signal. A form of feedback from your own consciousness. And in that feedback, you find freedom. Trading becomes less about prediction and more about reflection. The chart becomes a mirror, reflecting your patterns, your impatience, your illusions of control. Every losing trade is no longer a failure. It's a message. A lesson written in price and time. You start journaling not just numbers, but states of mind. Not just entries and exits, but thoughts and impulses. You see how every decision, emerges from emotion. And how every emotion reveals a belief. And when you trace that belief back far enough, you find yourself. That's when trading transforms. From a pursuit into a practice. You start to realize. This isn't about markets anymore. It's about awareness. About presence. About how much of your life is being lived unconsciously. On autopilot. Without you even noticing. The market simply exposes it. Because trading amplifies truth. If you are fearful, it will show you. If you are greedy, it will test you. If you are patient, it will reward you. Not with profit, but with peace. And that peace is priceless. There's a quiet kind of trader you rarely hear about. They don't post results. Don't brag about profits. Don't chase views or validation. They trade in silence. Not to escape life, but to meet it. Fully, consciously. They see every position as a meditation. Every loss as a teacher. Every day as another chance to see through illusion. They understand that trading, at its highest level, isn't about money. It's about mastery of the self. Because the emotional cycle of markets isn't just about charts. It's about the cycle of human experience. Hope, fear, greed, despair. They exist in every part of life. Relationships, ambitions, even identity. Trading simply compresses them into a smaller window of time, forcing you to confront yourself faster. The market becomes the most honest mirror you'll ever face. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't lie. It reflects exactly who you are. With brutal precision. And if you can face that reflection without turning away, you begin to wake up. Awakening isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's the moment you stop reacting. The moment you see clearly. And no longer identify with every thought that passes through your mind. The moment you realize you are not your emotions. You are the awareness behind them. That realization doesn't make you perfect. But it gives you perspective. You begin to act with intention. Not compulsion. You begin to trade with clarity. Not craving. And that's the end of illusion. When the emotional cycle ends, you don't feel like a winner. You feel lighter. Calmer. Whole. You no longer chase highs. Or run from lows. You flow. You observe. You adapt. You accept that every move, up or down, is part of a larger rhythm. And your only task is to stay in tune with it. This is trading as inner practice, where each chart is a lesson. Each mistake, a meditation. Each moment, a chance to wake up again. The market was never testing your strategy. It was testing your consciousness. When you finally understand that, everything changes. You no longer seek the next setup. You seek the next moment of awareness. And that awareness becomes your true edge. Because while others chase profits, you chase presence. And in presence, you find peace. The only kind of profit that never fades.